I'll never forget the moment I tore open that letter, my hands trembling as I read the words that turned my world upside down. My family's 1,200 acres land my grandfather poured his soul into was gone. Sold. Not by us, but by some faceless corporation called Summit Grove Enterprises, with the local homeowners association pulling the strings. They'd exploited some legal loophole, and just like that, our legacy was snatched away for a measly $60,000. My heart sank as I stood in my kitchen in Willow Creek, Oregon, on a chilly November morning in 2024, staring out at the rolling fields my grandfather, Henry, had tamed with his bare hands. This wasn't just dirt. It was freedom, his life's work, a promise to me to never let it go. I wasn't about to roll over. This is the story of how I fought back against a system rigged to steal what was ours. It was a Tuesday, the kind of crisp fall day that makes you glad you live in a place like Willow Creek. I'd paid every tax bill on time, kept the property pristine for over a decade, so when that letter from the county tax office arrived, my gut told me something was wrong. The envelope felt heavier than usual, like it carried bad news. I poured a coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and ripped it open, expecting some routine nonsense. Instead, I laughed a sharp, bitter laugh when I read that my land had been transferred to Summit Grove Enterprises due to an unpaid tax lien. A lien? For $60,000? On land worth over $2.5 million? I read it 3 times, the words blurring as my pulse raced. My grandfather's voice echoed in my head. This land is yours, Ethan. Don't let anyone take it. I looked out at the fields, the same ones he'd cleared by hand, and tried to make sense of how a place so alive with our history could be stolen so coldly. I walked the property that morning, boots crunching on frost-covered grass, checking the boundaries I'd surveyed just last year. Everything was in order, fences intact, records clean, taxes paid. Nothing screamed delinquent to me. But the letter claimed otherwise, citing proper legal procedures for tax lien recovery. Proper? I hadn't received a single notice, no warning, no chance to fight. The paperwork mentioned Sarah Langley, the HOA president, as the one who'd facilitated the transfer for community development interests. Sarah, with her polished smile and city slicker vibe, had moved to Willow Creek from Seattle 3 years ago, always looking like she was headed to a boardroom instead of a rural HOA meeting. I called her, keeping my voice steady despite the anger bubbling up. "Sarah, what's going on with my land?" I asked. Her response was all corporate jargon, no heart. "The property had outstanding tax obligations, Ethan. We followed established procedures." I pressed for proof, but she dodged, mentioning special assessments I'd never heard of. When I demanded documentation, she got defensive, saying reasonable property owners would understand the need for community compliance. The call ended with her hanging up, and I knew then this wasn't a mistake, it was deliberate. I spent hours combing through every piece of mail from the past year, searching for any hint of a tax issue. Nothing. The paperwork felt like a setup with phrases like strategic land use optimization that didn't belong in a standard tax notice. I called my friend James Carter, a property lawyer in Portland with 20 years of experience. His voice tightened when I told him what happened. "Ethan, this isn't just a clerical error," he said. "Summit Grove's been pulling this across the state. They use legal mumbo-jumbo to confuse people and rush through acquisitions before anyone can fight back." His office was stacked with files from similar cases, families blindsided by sudden liens, properties sold at auctions they never knew about. He showed me records of Summit Grove acquiring thousands of acres in rural Oregon, always with the same playbook: vague notices, expedited auctions, and no real chance for owners to respond. I started talking to neighbors, and that's when I met Mrs. Clara Thompson, a tough old widow who'd lived in Willow Creek her whole life. Over coffee at the local diner, her hands shook as she pulled out a folder of newspaper clippings. "They did this to the Larson family," she whispered. "Lost 90 acres the same way. Almost got me, too." She'd been tracking Summit Grove's moves for years, documenting how they targeted valuable land with special assessments nobody could contest in time. The Larsons found out their land was gone when bulldozers showed up. Clara's stories lit a fire, and Metta's wasn't just about my family. It was a pattern, a coordinated attack on rural landowners. The more I dug, the uglier it got. Courthouse records showed Summit Grove had snapped up over 3,500 acres in 18 months, worth $18 million, using the same shady tactics. Sarah Langley's name kept popping up, not just as HOA president, but as a consultant on development boards across 4 counties. She had insider access to zoning changes and infrastructure plans, letting her cherry-pick properties before their value skyrocketed. It was a gold mine, and she was cashing in. Then I found a bombshell buried in the paperwork, a handwritten note on a contract linking Sarah directly to Summit Grove's profits. Her signature matched the HOA documents I'd seen. This wasn't just negligence, it was a conspiracy. Things took a darker turn as I kept pushing. I started noticing a black SUV parked across the street, the same guy watching me from the diner window, showing up at the courthouse when I was there. My phone calls had weird clicks, and my inbox filled with spam from legal firms I'd never contacted. I told myself I was paranoid, but then my house was broken into. I came home one night to find the door ajar, no forced entry, just papers scattered and my grandfather's keepsakes, old photos, his handwritten letters torn to pieces. This wasn't a random burglary. It was personal, meant to hit me where it hurt. The police took a report, but without evidence, they could only suggest better locks. The timing, just days after I'd found Sarah's financial ties, screamed intimidation. Instead of scaring me off, it made me certain I was onto something big. I started keeping meticulous records, every call, every document, every shred of evidence. My dining room became a war room, covered in timelines and files. That's when I met Laura Bennett, a nervous accountant who'd worked for Summit Grove. She slipped me an envelope at a coffee shop, her hands trembling. "I've seen what they do," she said. "They target people like your grandfather, older folks with deep ties to their land, but no cash to fight back." Her documents were a gold mine. Emails plotting to exploit elderly owners, financial records showing Sarah's bonuses for delivering properties. Laura risked everything, her job, her livelihood, to help me. She knew speaking out could ruin her, but she couldn't stay silent. The HOA meeting was my chance to go public. Over 120 people showed up, the room buzzing with tension. I laid it all out. The pattern of seizures, Sarah's conflicts of interest, the millions Summit Grove was raking in. Sarah stood there, smiling like a politician, but her eyes were cold. She tried to spin it as community progress, but when I showed the crowd her financial ties, the room erupted. Then she leaned in, voice low, and said, "You're playing a dangerous game, Ethan. You'll lose everything." It wasn't just a threat, it was a promise. The crowd was split. Some cheered my fight. Others whispered about the risks of taking on a giant like Summit Grove. James warned me the legal battle would be brutal. Summit Grove's lawyers, 5 of them from a top Portland firm, came out swinging at the first hearing, painting me as a bitter landowner who didn't understand legitimate tax laws. But our evidence, the timelines, the emails, held up. The judge ordered discovery, a crack in their armor. Sarah's confidence slipped when she realized her financial records would be exposed. Then, during the hearing, someone slipped a note into my briefcase, a name, a local councilman tied to Sarah's deals. This wasn't just about land, Anna Maria, it was systemic corruption. The FBI got involved, and things moved fast. Special Agent Daniel Ruiz led the charge, uncovering racketeering and conspiracy. The key was Michael Harper, Sarah's financial partner at Summit Grove. He knew everything: bank accounts, offshore deals, the works. When we learned he was planning to flee to Zurich with $300,000 in cash, my heart raced. If he got away, our case would collapse. The FBI tracked him for days, watching him liquidate assets, book flights. At the last second, they nabbed him at Portland International, 40 minutes before his plane took off. Raids followed, 50 agents hitting 6 locations, seizing computers, records, everything. Sarah was arrested at her waterfront estate, her empire crumbling as agents carted off evidence. The trials were relentless. Sarah got 25 years for orchestrating a $45 million land theft scheme. Harper, who turned state's evidence, got 18. 14 others went down, sentences from 5 to 15 years. My family's 1,200 acres were returned, along with compensation for the hell we'd been through. Over 300 families in 7 states got their land back or millions in payouts. The case sparked the Langley Act, tightening oversight on municipal tax schemes to protect landowners. I turned part of the land into the Henry Justice Center, offering free legal aid to families facing similar fights. It's helped over 600 people in its first year. Standing on that land now, I feel my grandfather's pride, but the scars remain. The stress took a toll: sleepless nights, health warnings, trust in institutions shattered. Yet, seeing Sarah led away in handcuffs, her mansion auctioned off for $14 million to compensate victims, felt like justice. But I know this fight isn't over. Corporate greed doesn't quit, and land is still just profit to some. What would you do if your family's legacy was stolen like that? Would you risk everything: your safety, your sanity, to fight back, or would you walk away to save yourself? And what about the system? Can we ever really trust it to protect us? Or is it built to favor the powerful? Drop your thoughts below, hit that like button if this story hit you hard, and subscribe if you're ready to keep fighting for what's right.